We mentioned yesterday, the Midrash, that the reason why these three particular species, the Shor, Kesef, Eis, were chosen by the Torah as the species for Korbanos, because Avram Avinu, when he hosted the Malachim, the Torah tells us, El Aboker, Rotz Avram, the Yitzchok, we find the Akedah, there was the Ayil, Nechal Bisvach, and by Yaakov, there was Shnei Godoyizim, his mother told him to fetch 2 goats from the flock to make delicacies for Yitzchok, to receive the bracha. That's why these species were chosen to be the Korbanos. There's a word from the Ramchal, he says something phenomenal concept, that we find that in the wardrobe of the Jew, that if you have a garment that has 4 corners, you have to put on tzitzis. So that means that the garment of the Jew is associated with the Torah. It has relevance to mitzvahs. Once the mitzvah has relevance to the attire of the Jew, it elevates the whole area of attire. Clothing of the Jew is elevated because the Jew's attire identifies with Hashem. And he says that we find that sheep are used for korbanos, even when we eat the sheep, not within the context of korban, the sheep has a special status. It is designated for what? For HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The shor is designated for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The ayil, the keves, is designated for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It elevates, the whole species is elevated. Because anything which is within Hashem's domain, it takes on a special status, a special value. That's the principle, he says, the Ramchal. So it's not like other species. So we find kosher species. The Medrash says that there are 10 kosher species. 3 of them are domesticated, 7 are undomesticated. So 7 undomesticated species, although they're kosher, and you have to slaughter them, and you're permitted to eat them, but because they have no relevance to Shulchan Gavoah, to the table of God, which is a Mizbeach, they're considered ordinary. They don't have that special status. It's very interesting. We find, the Gemara tells us that the chalev of a koi, or a tzvi, which is undomesticated, its chalev is permitted to eat. Permitted to eat that part, that fat of the undomesticated animal. The chalev of a domesticated animal, you're not permitted to eat. Why aren't you permitted to eat it? Because that chalev goes on the mizbeach. Even though the chalev of the unconsecrated animal doesn't go on the mizbeach, but again, it's this principle. Since this species is designated for the korban, and even the unconsecrated, has relevance to that, it has that elevated status, because it identifies with the mizbeach, therefore chalev is not permitted, because the chalev is meant to go on the mizbeach. That's what it's designated for. It's l'shulchan gavoah. That's its designation. But the undomesticated animal, because it has no relevance to the mizbeach, it's considered ordinary. Therefore, the Torah says it's chalev. You're permitted to eat its chalev, because that has no relevance to that. Rabbinically, one doesn't eat the chalev because, again, if once you eat the chalev of one kosher species as a fence, we don't eat the chalev of the kosher species.